Hi everyone, I'm Jude, and I'm just going to say that this is a little bit scary, and that I have an inner saboteur that tries to tell me that I'm not good enough, and that what I have to say isn't important. But I didn't let a belief of inadequacy stop me from being here today, nor did I let a feeling of unworthiness define my worth. Because I'm at a stage where I no longer allow false beliefs to govern my life. And I'm going to talk about some of those beliefs, the impact they have had on me, and how learning to go beyond them has helped me to get in touch with the true essence of who I am. 5 years ago, I came out as transgender and non-binary. But for most of my life, I had absolutely no idea. Now, I'm aware that some of you might be thinking that I just put a huge barrier between our life experiences. But I want to challenge that, because I have a feeling that you might just relate to me more than you realize. When I think back to being around 3 or 4 years old, I see possibly the most authentic version of myself. At that age, I was uninhibited, free to explore, to be creative, and to express myself. But all that started to change. I had something I called my dressing up box, which was like a treasure chest full of shirts, ties, suit jackets, a bit like what I'm wearing tonight, funnily enough. But back then, I'd play dress up in the land of make-believe, where it was acceptable to do so. Because when I went out into the world, I was put in my little summer dress, and I was expected to get on with life like the rest of the little girls. Any time I dared to reveal this side of myself, I was ridiculed for it. I recall several occasions where I was laughed at by strangers for wearing the suit, or picked on by kids at school for cutting my hair short. I battled with my mental health throughout my childhood, feeling so deeply uncomfortable in a role I simply could not identify with, and carrying a feeling of shame, believing that there must be something wrong with me. At that age, in those early years, I'd been taught to reject myself. And so I went on to completely abandon myself. And by the time I hit my late teens, things got from bad to worse. I was consumed with low self-esteem and anxiety and relied on substances to cope. I conformed, believing that if I could be like everybody else, then that would be the answer to my deep sense of shame and unhappiness. But as I tried to fit into the world around me, I just became more and more disconnected from myself. Luckily, I managed to access support for my mental health, and I went on a journey of recovery that eventually became a journey of self-discovery and becoming reacquainted to the person I'd lost all those years ago. But how did I spend 3 decades of my life not knowing myself? Well, I wasn't taught or encouraged to. And I wonder how many of us relate to picking up certain beliefs of who we think we should be and learn to discard who we really are because of conditioning. What is conditioning? Conditioning is the process of training or influencing a person so that they do or expect a particular thing without thinking about it. There are many forms, but I'm going to focus on social conditioning and what our society and culture have trained us to believe as normal. And yet there are 7.9 billion of us on the planet, all completely different from the other, including in the case of identical twins. So how can we possibly define normal? Let's think about this in terms of gender. At birth, we are categorized into one of 2 sexes, despite there being a variation within sex that still isn't being widely spoken about. Alongside these 2 binary categories, we are assigned a gender and a set of roles and expectations of what it means to be a man or a woman. What to wear, how to behave, what to do for a living, and so much more. We've even associated gender to colours. I mean, really? Are they just socially constructed ideas that have been embedded into our mindset by the society that we were born into? So much is decided for us, but if we're all different, then is it any surprise that many of us reach a stage where we realize that's not who we are? I was so unaware of my own conditioning that I became habituated to an extreme discomfort that I didn't even know I was suffering. Something really powerful happened. The Matrix has been described as a transgender allegory, which is no surprise, because when I realized I was trans, I literally felt like I'd been unplugged from a virtual reality, and that what I'd been taught to believe about myself couldn't be further from the truth. And in the 9 years that I've been a speaker, I've worked with kids around the country, and I have witnessed a significant shift, especially in the last few years. I've asked myself why there seem to be more LGBTQIA+ identifying youth than ever before. And I've come to a conclusion that the world that I was brought up in was so different to the world young people live in today. I think kids are waking up sooner. In my childhood, I lived with Section 28, a law which prohibited the promotion of homosexuality by local authorities and made it illegal to teach LGBTQIA+ topics in Britain's schools. In addition, there was no social media, no online resources, and no trans representation in the public eye. I was given a very one-dimensional form of learning in comparison to the many sources of information young people have access to today. The digital age has given them the opportunity to find their voice. But how many of those voices are still being silenced, just like mine? My eyes were opened when I eventually met other trans people and identified so heavily with some of their feelings and experiences. And when a school asked me to deliver an LGBTQIA+ awareness session, I realized how little I knew on the topic. And so I did my research. And education proved to be so powerful because it was through the process of self-education that I was finally able to understand myself. I went from being so anxious that I could barely string a sentence together to finding the power in my own voice. I have the language to communicate who I am instead of other people making that decision for me. And by reclaiming my autonomy, I have been able to empower myself and rewrite the narrative of a story that was written for me. It meant facing my internalized shame and giving myself permission to pick up where I left off as a kid. I put my suit jacket back on. I cut my hair short. I explored my sexual orientation, and I discovered the words to describe my gender. I believe we could learn a lot about authenticity from our children. I work with children as young as 7 years old who can be vulnerable, who aren't afraid to cry in front of me. I've seen young boys hugging and supporting each other in front of their entire class. And then they get older and all that stops. Even as an educator, it's important for me always to be teachable because young people have taught me so much. And in many ways, I'm reliving a childhood I never really had. I have gone on to affirm that experience by aligning physically to the person within, or what many call transition. And although listening to my intuition felt like stepping into the unknown, however scary, I'd experienced more and more freedom along the way. Learning what it means to be my authentic self has been absolutely life-changing. Not only has it profoundly improved my mental health, but I've gone on to thrive in all areas of my life. My confidence has grown. My career took off during COVID, believe it or not. And in my first summer after top surgery, I stood on a beach topless for the very first time and experienced a feeling of euphoria I don't even know how to describe. I went on to share my joy on social media platforms, and as if the world was listening, I was contacted by a casting agent and cast for a Harrods beauty campaign. My line for the commercial was, "My beauty is being myself." And I realized that that phrase couldn't ring more true at that particular moment. I had found the beauty in being myself, and the most valuable belief of all. I understood that I had nothing to be ashamed of, that there was never anything wrong with me and so much right with me, that I could be proud and celebrate who I am and hopefully pass on that message to others. So what are the beliefs that are keeping us trapped and preventing us from being who we are and living freely? Well, our journeys are so individual, so only you can answer that. But I do believe that it requires us to go within and start asking ourselves some deeper questions. Perhaps you can think back to when you were younger. Who were you back then? What did you have to compromise because of what was expected of you? And how can you begin to embrace the unique qualities that truly reflect who you are? I believe becoming who you are requires letting go of who you are not, a willingness to go beyond the conditions we picked up throughout our lives, and to have the courage to be ourselves despite the risk of being misunderstood. Is this a journey that we could all benefit from embarking on? Because through the process, I've unleashed so much power and potential I didn't even know I had. And I realized that my trans journey is just a human journey. Behind my labels is just a person trying to navigate their way towards a happier and healthier future. And so far, I haven't done too badly. I'd like to leave you with a quote derived from a tweet by author Paulo Coelho. Maybe the journey isn't so much about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming everything that isn't really you, so you can be the you that you were meant to be in the first place. Thank you.